In the 80s, Nintendo and their NES reinvented video games, and the world was about to be introduced to a brand new game. A brand new style that had never been done before. Kids used to go to their backyard with friends and use their imaginations to go on adventures that in real life wasn't even possible. Well, an adventure released on NES that allowed kids to not have to use an imagination. They could see the adventure play out right before their very own eyes on their living room TV. Sure, they had most likely seen the movie The Goonies at this time, and that was an adventure of its own, but through the Nintendo Entertainment System, now you're able to control the adventure. In 1986, The Legend of Zelda was released in Japan for the Famicom Disk System, and later released in 1987 for the NES in North America. The Legend of Zelda was an action-packed game with hidden dungeons and secrets all for gamers to figure out. The player takes control of Link, who sets out on a quest to save Princess Zelda. He searches high and low in the fantasy land known as Hyrule. Across the map you'll find item shops and many enemies, but you must collect 8 fragments of the Triforce of Wisdom, which can be found in dungeons across Hyrule. The main goal was to defeat the antagonist Ganon, a pig-like creature, and restore Hyrule to the way it once was known. Even though I mentioned kids excited to play something like this because it is an adventure, parents played this game because I feel like it was a little too difficult for kids. Now, me as a kid, when I first popped this game in and I saw that waterfall intro and the music hit me, I have so much nostalgia for that. You start the game off with 3 heart containers. With only 3 hearts, the enemies in the overworld feel tough, but the more secret locations you find containing heart containers give you some breathing room. Always, when given the option to choose a heart container, take it. If it's a heart container or a potion, take the heart container, because the heart containers will not come back. You can get potion at any time. If you choose to take on the dungeons first thing, the first few will seem rough. I recommend finding as many heart containers as possible before you begin. Along with increasing your health, you can find the blue ring and the red ring to help reduce damage dealt to you by enemies. However, the red ring isn't found until you have reached the final dungeon. See, this was one of those early games that made you try everything. Nothing was handed to you. The Legend of Zelda is a cryptic game, and not for its own good. Unless you knew what you were doing, it's best played with a strategy guide. Throughout the game you can find hints, but they're really no good to you. They don't make any sense. Eventually Nintendo Power Issues would release and have answers for you. Or if you got your hands on the official Nintendo Player's Guide, that was a blessing. I'll give you a few examples. There are 9 dungeons in total, but to access the 7th dungeon, you'll need to go to one of the ponds and play the recorder that you found from the 5th dungeon, play that recorder to dry up the pond, and an entrance to the hidden dungeon appears. How would anyone have known this? Or to access the 8th dungeon, you must burn a random bush to the far right of the overworld. Or to access the 5th dungeon, you have to climb 4 staircases in a row, which looks like you're just stuck in a loop, but the screen will eventually change and put you front and center of that dungeon. Without endless hours of exploring these things, how would you know? This probably frustrated so many gamers, and unfortunately, some may have given up and turned it off. I know as a kid, I didn't get very far. This game may look dated to young kids today, but I promise you, it was and still can be an experience. The best part about it though was that you could play it and have a total different experience than a friend of yours that played. It truly was the start of a legend. A legendary franchise that would go on to be one of Nintendo's faces of the franchise. Nostalgia is a powerful thing, and the nostalgia that I feel for this game puts it way up high in my all-time favorite games. But that's just me. There are much better Zelda experiences, such as the Super Nintendo's A Link to the Past, or even the most recent masterpiece known as Breath of the Wild for the Nintendo Switch. Depending on your strategy, you can take a brutal stroll through Hyrule and die what feels to be 1,000,000 times, or collect heart containers and carefully examine every screen. Move every block, bomb every wall, burn every bush, because once you get the hang of it, it's a blast. Except for those dark nuts. I hate those things. As every game should, the difficulty increases the further you advance. Stronger enemies appear in the dungeon. Old bosses of the previous dungeons become regular enemies, and certain enemies can only be beaten by certain attacks. Like Dodongo, he has to be killed by bombs. Goma has to take an arrow straight into the eye, and Gleeok can be defeated by attacking its multiple heads. When you reach the final level, Death Mountain, it's easily the biggest challenge you'll face, and the princess is being held captive deep in this dungeon that is very challenging. You're ready though as you'll ever be to take on Ganon, and guess what? He's freaking invisible. You will have to randomly attack the air and hope to hit him. Once hit, he will show on screen but disappear again. You'll have to hit him 3 times with the magical sword, he'll turn brown, and one shot using the silver arrow will kill him off. He can't be beaten without that silver arrow, which that can also be found in this final dungeon. An NES classic, an all-time great, just once again needs to be played with a guide. When I first beat this game and the end screen shown, I felt accomplished. As a kid, I was very familiar with the game, but just couldn't beat it. But when I finally did, what a great feeling. NES has some brutal games. A term that has been thrown around for years is NES hard. And there are way more harder games than Zelda on NES, but in my opinion, this is a must for true gamers. It's a challenge, so go on the original adventure that started a legend. It's dangerous to go alone. And take this.